Yo, what is up guys? Grim here. So today we're going to be doing Windripper. This is my fifth try at this video, so I'm hoping this one goes through. But we're going to get into it. I'm going to give you the lowdown about how you can build this character on a budget and make sure it's as effective as my one. So I'm going to do a quick map here for you guys, and I'm going to really give you a feel for what the build is going to be like. And we're going to do it on a 5 link without Headhunter, and we're going to basically use no belt, and hopefully we can do okay with that. And you guys are going to get a fantastic idea of what your character is going to look like after you build it up. So we're going to get into this map here, and I'm going to talk through the gameplay a little bit as we do it. So when you're playing Windripper, the one thing that you actually do need to do is keep up all of your buffs pretty much constantly, and that's going to allow you to basically have a really effective character. So you need to keep up all your flasks pretty much the whole map, and you want to be trying to keep up Blood Rage, which is pretty easy to do, and if you can, keep up your Vile Haste. So that's kind of the gameplay behind the build, and that's all you really need to do. The rest is kind of just point and click, and you basically blow up the whole screen wherever you aim as soon as you've got a few key items. So the other thing, and the really good thing about Windripper, is that the single target is actually pretty damn good. When you get to the boss, you'll see that this map does have elemental equilibrium on it, so I probably won't do as much damage as I normally do, but it should be pretty fine anyway. So another really important thing about Windripper on the single target is that the way I'm playing the character is you want to try and be as far away from monsters as you can to do the most damage. And you'll see how I play on the boss, and that's really important. And you guys should take note of that when you guys are doing your own maps. So the further you are away, the more damage you'll actually do to the boss. So it's really important to remember as well that we're on a 5 link here, so we're not going to have the greatest damage in the world, but it should be okay. So as you can see here, we can kill the boss. It's not the fastest because this map has elemental equilibrium on it, but we're doing okay anyway. So it probably just took a few more seconds than normal because of that buff on there, but we killed it in a few seconds nonetheless. So when you compare it to something like EK or Auto Bomber, the damage is very good. Those two builds really rely on Vile Breach, which is very hard to get this league for its single target, but Windripper is able to do it without it, which is very good. So let's get straight into the guide now, and we can kind of talk a little bit about the build. So we'll put that stuff back on. Again, you don't need a 6th link for this build, and you definitely don't need a Headhunter, and we'll go into kind of some alternatives you have for those coming up now. So to start off with, I want to go into the classic Grimro spreadsheet here. And there's a lot to cover here. I'm going to skim over a few things and go into more detail on others because I think a few things are self-explanatory for a lot of people and a few other things need explaining. So to begin with, immunities is kind of something you guys probably understand. The only things we're really looking for are bleed immunity and freeze immunity, which we get from our flasks, which we'll go into when we get to the flask section. And then we can choose to get poison immunity as well from the Pantheon. Our bandit we're going to be helping is Alira. Alira is definitely the best choice, so just always pick Alira. It gives us resistances and critical strike multiplier, which is exactly what we need for this build. So for flask choices here, there's a few things that are going to look pretty familiar for you guys. That is the Alchemist's Quicksilver Flask of Adrenaline. What this does is basically speeds up your movement speed in game. You'll see it here, 111% here. It's got a new follower, but we go up to 186 with the flask. Because we're a movement speed kind of build, we rely on running. This is very important. Pick up one of these as soon as you possibly can. The next up, we've got a Diamond Flask here. We're a critical strike based build, so we're going to be using a Diamond Flask as one of our main flasks. You want to keep this up all the time. Next up, we have a Jade Flask of Reflexes. So in game, this is just going to give you a ton of evasion. So as you can see here, I have 27,000 evasion when I don't have it on, but when I do have it on, I go up to 48,000. So this isn't too important to understand right now. I'm going to get into that later on when we get to the gear, but just remember, get a Jade Flask of Reflexes. This is an essential item for your build, and you really want to be picking this up and having it on you the whole map to maximize your movement speed. So next up, we have an optional flask. You can either go with a silver flask to give you really consistent onslaught, which is what I like, or you can choose another defensive kind of flask and get onslaught somewhere else on the tree, either via a skill gem or a jewel. I like it on the silver flask though. Perhaps you want to grab a sapphire flask or something else if you like that. The last one here is Dying Sun, which I'm going to go into later when we get to this gear section, as you can see over here. But basically, it's a damage flask. If you can't afford a Dying Sun, just go with another defensive flask, like a Resistance flask or a Life flask, and I would recommend getting Curse Immunity on that. So again, with the flasks, make sure you get your immunities on either your diamond flask or your silver flask. So you want freeze or bleed immunity on the diamond, and then freeze or bleed immunity again on the silver flask. Make sure you have one of each, and you're going to be good to go for your immunities. So next up, we have some utilities here. I'm not going to go over this. This is going to just kind of be a bit of a reference for you guys so that you guys can understand kind of what's going on and what kind of totems you have access to and you should be using. So let's move straight into the skill gem links. So to explain the skill gem links, I'm going to go to a bit of an open area because the hideout's a little bit crowded here, and we're going to head over to the ledge. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how Tornado Shot works. So I really want to explain to you guys so you understand how the damage actually works on Tornado Shot, so you guys can kind of get a really good idea of how it scales and you guys can really understand it. So without any of this really crazy gear on, you'll notice that Tornado Shot doesn't fire too many projectiles. So when you're firing out a Tornado Shot, you'll see that it creates this little tornado explosion at the end here. So it's a common misconception that these explosions actually do damage. However, that's not the case. So when you're firing out a Tornado Shot, don't worry about too much of where you hit the explosion because that doesn't do any damage. What you really want to be paying attention to is these little arrows coming out of the tornadoes. So these are what does the damage on Tornado Shot, and whenever you look at your tooltip damage, the thing that's doing that tooltip damage is the little arrows. So the really unique thing about Tornado Shot is that, as you can see here, right now I have 2 tornadoes. And what's cool about that is an arrow from each of the tornadoes, as you can see that coming out here, can hit one target. So if I have 3 tornadoes and I have lots of arrows coming out, an arrow from each of those tornadoes can hit one target if you're really good at aiming it and you get some decent luck on your kind of tornadoes. So in taking that into account, we can hit what's on our tooltip multiple times per shot if we aim it correctly. So that's really important to know, and I'm going to go into that in a little bit in a second as well. So the other thing you need to know about Tornado Shot is that by baseline, each of these tornadoes fires out 3 projectiles kind of in an evenly spaced fashion out from it. So as you can see here, we've got a few coming out, and it looks pretty good. There is a way to increase this, but we'll go into that in the gear section, but baseline it's 3. So per arrow you're firing 3 more arrows, which each have a chance to do damage to a single target or all the targets on the screen really. So immediately now you understand that the best thing for Tornado Shot is to get more projectiles, so you have more individual tornadoes, which each have a chance of dealing damage to a single target if you line up the arrows correctly. So when we go to greater multiple projectiles here, and we put that in, now we have 6 tornadoes, so we have 6 chances to each hit a single arrow on a single target. So in theory, if you hit all of them, you'd have 6 times your tooltip damage, which is really, really crazy. So that's kind of the idea behind single target Tornado Shot, and your goal when you're firing at a single target should be to line up the tornadoes so they hit as many of their individual arrows out of each tornado on one target as possible. So to do that, we've got a few extra kind of tips and tricks. The first thing you can do to get more arrows to hit the single target is just get more projectiles. So you can look at things like getting a +1 arrow quiver. Obviously, you've got greater multiple projectiles and stuff like that. You've got Dying Sun, which we'll get to in the gear section. But if you really stack it up, you can get to something like 11 arrows, which really allows you to cover the screen and all these arrows and have a lot of overlap. So you'll be doing a lot more of your tooltip damage to the single target, and you can really rack up some pretty crazy numbers. So now that we really understand how Tornado Shot works, we can really get a feel for how to scale it, which is through more projectiles and some good aiming. So the trick for aiming at bosses is to shoot the tornadoes through the boss and just behind them, because then you'll get this kind of arc going on here, which we can see here, which is kind of like an arc like here. And as you can see, a lot of the Tornado Shot arrows actually converge on a single point here, which is where you want your target. So if our target's this rotted round shield, we can fire it here, and a lot of them are hitting that rotted round shield. So that's going to be really good. Now you guys understand the mechanics. And obviously, the more projectiles you add, the more arrows going all over the screen. It means you can have a smoother gameplay in terms of clearing the map, which is what we want. So that's really cool. Now let's get into the links behind Tornado Shot. So let's really just quickly go over the 4 essential ones. So obviously you need Tornado Shot. And because we're trying to get as many arrows as possible to line up on a single target and hit the screen, we're going to use greater multiple projectiles. And then we have a few just generic damage skill gem links here. We have added cold damage and elemental damage with attacks, which are just going to juice up your damage a little bit more. For our 5th link, you have a few options here. You can go for Pierce and Chain. which are very good options. If you want to look into chain or maybe fork, I recommend looking at part 1 of this video and checking that out, which is going to help you out a lot. And you guys are going to really understand some of the choices behind Windripper and Tornado Shot. So if you want to check that out, there'll be a link in the description for that. But I would always recommend for most new players who don't really have too much experience building their own builds, go for Pierce. It's going to give you the most damage and most consistency for the build. So 5th link, Pierce pretty much all the time. However, you can try out Mirage Archer if you would like. A lot of people really like that, and it's a green gem as well. So just try it out, throw it in there, test it out. If you like it, keep it. If you don't, go back to Pierce. So for our 6th link, we want to go with either increased critical strikes or added lightning damage. So add lightning damage gives you the most tooltip damage for bosses and high maps and stuff like that. You're probably going to be using that. But increased critical strikes give you the most consistency for the build, and we'll get to why it's consistent later on. But I like increased critical strikes, and that's what I use all the time. So a few of these you're going to get to understanding a little bit later, but you kind of understand the gem links now. So let's move on to the helmet links. So for our helmet, we're going to be using Blink Arrow as our main mobility spell, which you can see here is just a teleport around, which leaves a clone behind you, which will not necessarily taunt enemies, but enemies will hit it instead of you. So it kind of takes a bit of the fire off you. This is really good for getting up and down cliffs, and I pretty much use it on cooldown because it's a lot faster than kind of changing directions with running, and I really like how quick and fast you can get around. So that's going to be Blink Arrow, and I have it linked to faster attacks to kind of just speed up how quick the arrow lands, and it makes you just move a little bit quicker. Next up we have Grace and Blood Rage. So Blood Rage is our main source of leech and frenzy charge generation. So frenzy charges are going to give us more attack speed and more damage, and then leech obviously is what we want to sustain our character throughout maps. So you want to keep that up at all times. When you start the map, just throw it on you, and whenever you kill a monster, it will refresh on you, and you'll be good to go. Next up we have Grace, which is just an aura, which will give you a lot of evasion. So the cool thing about Windripper, and a really important thing, is that you need to hit a threshold of about 45,000 evasion to get a ton of movement speed. So we really need a lot of help getting there because that is a lot of evasion, and Grace is going to be our aura of choice to get to that 45,000. Along with that evasion floss we talked about earlier, that's really going to juice up our evasion to hit that 45,000 threshold. So just keep Grace on you at all times. It's not too bad, and you're going to have a good time. Next up, let's talk about gloves. So our gloves are going to have our Curse on Hit, Herald, Assassin's Mark kind of thinger in there, and we're also going to have our Golem. So the Golem we choose to use is a Lightning Golem to give us a bit of extra attack speed to really smooth out the gameplay and make sure that we're attacking nice and fast and getting to the next pack of monsters as fast as possible. So just keep him up all the time and you're going to be good. Next up, we have a Herald of Ice, Curse on Hit, Assassin's Mark setup. So for those of you who don't know, Herald of Ice is a kind of aura that you put on yourself. It gives you a little bit of cold damage, but that's not important. What we're really interested in is when we kill a frozen enemy, it causes that enemy to explode, which you might have seen in the video. And that explosion, because we have it linked to Curse on Hit Assassin's Mark, when that explosion happens, it's going to curse all the monsters around it that it hits with what's linked to the Curse on Hit, which is Assassin's Mark. So when we kill those monsters that we curse with those explosions, those are going to give us power charges. And power charges are going to increase our crit and damage and smoothness of the build overall. So that's why we're using that, and it's really, really good. You guys are going to have a blast with that one. So those are our glove setups. So we've got some power charges and a bit of attack speed from our Golem there. Next up, let's talk about boots. So boots, we have a few interesting gems in here. We have our portal gem and we have Valhaste. These are the two noteworthy ones. So our portal gem basically is just a bit of quality of life. It makes it so you don't have to use portal scrolls, which is really nice. And I always use it on every single one of my characters. It just really does help out a lot. And we also have Valhaste here as well. So Valhaste is a buff on yourself, which is basically, if you've ever played WoW, it's kind of like Bloodlust. It's going to give you a lot of attack and movement speed for its duration. The little bit of a kicker here is that to be able to activate Valhaste, you need to kill a certain amount of enemies in the map. But when you kill those enemies, then you can activate it for free. It doesn't cost any mana. So as you can see here, we've got 111% increased movement speed and a 0.3 attack time. When we activate Valhaste, boom, we go to 0.26 and we gain even more movement speed. So the idea behind Valhaste is that you're killing stuff constantly and you're able to activate it over and over again and have it on you for most of the map. So linked to these, we have faster casting and increased duration. So increased duration is there just to increase the time that Vaal Haste is on you so that you can run through the map and maybe even keep it up 100% of the time on the map. And that's going to basically increase your clear speed a lot and make the character a lot smoother to play. The other one here is not mandatory by any means. We have faster casting. This basically increases the speed at which you cast your portal. Without it, is actually very slow. As you can see, it takes a bit of time there. We don't like that. But with it on there, it's faster, and also with Vaal Haste, it takes a little bit of time to cast normally, but with faster casting, you can snap it out real quick and get back to killing things. So that's why I have that there. Just basically overall smoothness for the character and a bit of clear speed. So next up, we have a bit of a fun one here. So the cool thing about Windripper is you don't need a 6-link as we showed earlier, you just need a 5-link. So when you're getting to all these sockets that you have on your bow, you have a lot of freedom to put stuff in there. So 5-link there, possibly 6-link as we talked about earlier, but with this bow you definitely don't need another 6-link, so you can put some other stuff in there, but you do have a few options to put another 6-link in there if you're Mr. Moneybags. So if you've got the money and you've got another 6-link, so 2 of them, I got a few options here for you. So the first option is Barrage. I've got the links here. I can't show you this in game because I don't have the colors on my bow right now. But Barrage is basically a single target ability that makes you get up real close to enemies and you're going to basically shoot them with a shotgun effect, and it does the most damage out of any bow skill currently. So it's going to be really effective for single target. If you're looking for a really big juicy single target boost, going with a 6-link Barrage setup might be for you. The other option here, which I liked a lot more than Barrage, I tried them both, is Mirage Archer. So Mirage Archer is generally not too great to link up with your main clear speed build, because essentially what it does is it takes your 6-link and turns it into a 5-link, but you get the Mirage Archer effect, which isn't really, in my opinion, worth it. What is worth it though, however, is having 2 6-links, your main attack skill with a 6-link Tornado Shot, and then another Tornado Shot for bosses, which has Mirage Archer in there, which you can keep up kind of additionally to attacking with your normal 6-link. Essentially, in theory, giving you a 7-link kind of in practice. So with Mirage Archer, the way it functions is when you attack a monster, for 4 seconds you get a guy on your head who kind of walks around with you and copies the skill you just used for that 4 seconds. So if I use Tornado Shot and I hit a monster, I'm going to get the guy on my head for 4 seconds and he's going to be shooting out Tornado Shots with me as well while I use my main skill. So that's the idea. On bosses, you'll open up with a Mirage Archer Tornado Shot, which will give you the guy on your head, and then you'll be using your own Tornado Shot while he's shooting. After it runs out, refresh it, and then you'll have basically a juiced up 6-link Tornado Shot while also having a Mirage Archer 6-link Tornado Shot going at the same time. This actually gave me more DPS and more safety than what I got with Barrage, in my opinion, and I was able to clear Yellow Elder Guardians, and some tier 15 bosses by myself. So that was pretty good. Really enjoyed that. The other option though is to have some fun with it. If you don't have a 6-link bow, that's just okay. You can put a hard curse in there, so when you're doing bosses you can curse it manually instead of using curse on hit. You can put a cast on damage taken, Warlord's Mark, or anything like that kind of setup in there. Probably Immortal Call and cast on damage taken is where it's at. You can put a Falling Herald in there. Basically just have some fun with it, maybe a decoy totem as well. Nothing really you need to put in there though. Build functions fine without any sockets on the bow, to be honest. So let's move on now that we've talked about the sockets, and we'll go into gear. So with the gear, the main piece of armor that's really important for Windripper is the chest piece, which is going to be Queen of the Forest. And remember that evasion we were talking about earlier? This is where it comes into play. So if we read here, we get 1% increased movement speed per 450 evasion rating up to 100%. So to cap this out, we basically need 45,000 evasion. That'll give us 100% increased movement speed, which is basically like having 2 pairs of boots on your chest piece at all times. So just picture them on my chest. I'm running around with boots on my chest. So that's really crazy. The downside is we get 25% reduced movement speed by base, which takes us to a net gain of 75% increased movement speed, which is still pretty good, and it's definitely the only chest piece you want to use if you're focusing on clear speed. It's going to give you a lot of run speed, and it's going to really increase your clear speed a lot of the time. So that's going to be the only option for us for our chest piece. Make sure you get a 5-link one if you can't get a 6-link one. It's very cheap to get a 5-link one. This is the first item you want to be picking up on this list, and it's really the heart and soul of this build. So next up, I want to talk about just some cheaper things on the build, which are going to be the boots, the gloves, and the belt. So for boots, you want to be picking up Goldworm boots. So those are just magic fine boots, very cheap. Get a roll with about 18 to 20% quantity on it, and you're going to be good to go. That's basically a staple part of the build. You can get that very cheaply. Another cheap item you can get, which has a lot of magic find on it, is Sedima's Touch, which has 16% increased quantity, and that's going to do you very well as well. They're about 1 alchemy orb for a 16% quantity pair, so there's really no excuse for not getting them, and that's going to net you around 36% magic find if you get really good rolls. So that's already right up there in the magic find kind of universe, and you're going to be getting quite a little bit more currency from your maps. So next up, I want to cover belt. So belt, you can go really extreme with it. I've got a headhunter here as an option. I know a lot of you guys aren't going to have that, so just forget about that for now. But the real options we have are Darkness Enthroned, which is basically a 3-socket Abyss Jewel kind of belt. It's really cool because when you put Abyss Jewels in the belt, you can kind of choose which stats you want. So if you're trying to fill in some resist, some life, maybe a bit of damage, you can get those kind of jewels, or you can get something else, depending on what you need for your character. So Darkness Enthroned is a great kind of build your own adventure, really customizable belt if you need it. Another option I have here, which is the one I would use almost every single time if I didn't have a headhunter, is Bisco's Leash. So Bisco's Leash is kind of a mini headhunter. It's a kill streak kind of item. The more monsters you kill, the faster you kill them, the faster you'll go, which basically is really crazy. It gives you what's called Rampage, and I think you guys should really try it out. It's really fun. It really does increase your clear speed a lot, and it's really, really good. So if you don't want to use either of these, for some reason, you can go with just a normal leather belt with some life and resist on it, or a Stygian Vice with some life and resist on it. That's going to get you by just fine until you can look to pick up one of these, or in general, you just want to stick with that. So that's going to be the belt, boots, and gloves, and the body armor. So next up, I want to talk about rings, which is another really affordable part of this build. It's not going to cost you too much money. There's some really good options here for everybody. So if you're just starting out and you don't feel too comfortable with the amount of life or resist you have on Windripper, what you can do is just pick up some rare diamond or resist rings with some life on them and maybe a bit of resists. If you've got a little bit more money to play with, you can go with opal rings if you'd like. But yeah, just life and resist here, that's mainly the main thing you're looking for. So let's say you're feeling a bit more confident though, and you want a magic find alternative. So what you want to go for here is Thief's Torment. It's very affordable, it's about 10 chaos and gives you a whopping 16% quantity and some decent resistances. So this is basically it's a cheaper version of Venter's Gamble. It's still almost just as good in terms of the quantity department. It's just lacking the life that Venter's Gamble has on it. That's just fine though. Just pick that up and whack it on if you're kind of a bit of a budget player. So moving on, for the really big rich boys who have a lot of time to put into the game, you can get Venter's Gambles, which is the best magic find ring in my opinion. And these are going to set you back quite a few exalts for good ones. But what you're looking for on these ones are high life roll, an 8 to 10% quantity of items found roll, and just a few positive resistances on here. As you can see, mine have quite a few positive resists, and this is going to get you by just fine. For most people, Thief's Torment is going to get you by just fine. You're going to do well with that. So I would highly recommend grabbing Thief's Torment. Venter's Gambles are by no means necessary, and they're one of the last items you pick up. So let's move on to our amulet slot here. Amulet is another cheap one that you can get for a very affordable price. If you're a newer player, I recommend just grabbing a rare amulet just from PoE trade, maybe a 1 or 2 chaos one with some life, resists, and maybe some crit multi on it. But if you've got a bit more money to play around with, I suggest looking for a shaped amulet with a bit of item quantity on it, maybe some life and some resists as well. So the item quantity is basically what we're looking for on this build, and you can get it at a pretty good price, probably around 10 or 12 chaos for an item quantity shaped amulet. So if you have a lot of money to throw around, you can pick up a unique called Bisco's Collar. And this is going to give you a lot more magic finds than that shaped amulet does. Yeah, it's a bit more expensive. It's about 6 exalted orbs right now. So you definitely do have to be a bit wary about how much that costs. But you're going to get by just fine with a shaped amulet. There's no reason to invest all this currency when it doesn't give you that much of a benefit. So there is another more expensive option here, but that's another video. Most people in this video are going to be just fine with either Bisco's or a shaped amulet. So moving on to the helmet. This is the most important part of Windripper in my opinion. We talked about the 3 projectiles that come from each tornado earlier. What you can get is a helmet enchant that takes 3 projectiles to 5 per tornado. So when you're firing out your tornado shots, let's say you shoot 10 projectiles. Each of those will, by standard, shoot 3 arrows out of them. But with the helmet enchant, they shoot 5. So we go from 30 to 50. So what this allows you to do is have a higher chance to hit an arrow per each tornado, like we were talking about earlier, on a single target, because the spread is going to go from 3 to 5, which is just a much better spread. You'll have a higher chance of hitting that target with more tornado arrows. In addition to that, it increases the amount of arrows flying all around the screen, and it's basically going to improve the consistency of your clear by a lot. You're going to have to fire less tornado shots to hit every monster on the screen and one-shot all the packs. So the tornado shot helmet enchant is, in my opinion, a massive necessity. You really do want to get it. It is definitely one of the more expensive parts of this build for budget players, but it's well worth picking up, and there are a few budget options for you if you're just getting started on a budget. So if you're on a strict budget, I recommend just grabbing a rare helmet with the +2 tornado shot enchant on it, maybe with a bit of life and resists on it, or you can try and craft it yourself with some alchemy orbs or some chaos orbs. But yeah, a rare helmet will do just fine. You don't need any of these crazy uniques. This will get you by just okay. Let's say you got a little bit more money to throw around though. The next best option is a Star Conjurer's Head, which is going to give you a lot of attack speed, critical strike, and life. And you're going to be able to get the Tornado Shot helmet and gen on that for a little bit more than a rare, but it is going to be very, very good, and you're going to enjoy having that extra stats, crit, and attack speed, which you normally can't get on a rare helmet. The next best option is Light Poacher. This one is going to be significantly more expensive than Star Conjurers, but it does offer a lot more options in terms of how you can gear your character, and you're going to have a lot more flexibility. So with a Light Poacher, it's going to have those abyssal sockets we talked about earlier on the belt, and you're going to be able to put whatever you want in there. Again, it's like a build your own adventure. You can have some life, some resists, or anything you want really, some more damage. And it's also going to give you a really cool ability. So when you kill monsters, you'll have a chance to basically cause a spirit explosion on you, which is a bunch of green balls that will come out of your character. And these can be modified by skill gems that you put in the helmet. So if you get a 2-socket Light Poacher from the market, and you've got the helmet enchant on it, what you want to be putting in there is faster projectiles and pierce in the helmet skill gem sockets. And then obviously you have your abyssal sockets on top of that. If you get a 3-socket one, the third gem you want to put in there is physical aligning. If you do end up picking up the Light Poacher, you'll know exactly what I mean in terms of the skill and what you need to put in there, and you'll notice the effect immediately. So if you don't pick up the Light Poacher, this isn't too relevant for you, but if you do, that's just there for you. The next up, most expensive one with the helmet enchant on it is Devoto's Devotion. So this is the one I'm using, and the reason I'm using it is because it has 20% increased movement speed on it, which is critical. Movement speed is how you go faster on builds like this because you don't have an ability like Shield Charge. So basically what this is boots on your head. So again, just picture a boot on old Grim's head, and that's what you'll be getting from this helmet. So it's a very good helmet, more clear speed, it's got some attack speed on there as well, and it's going to be really, really great. Again, pretty expensive though, so you don't really need this. It's just going to take you down a notch on your clear speed a little bit, but if you have the money, this is the best option in my opinion. So that's going to be the majority of the items here. The only one we've got left to cover is the weapon and the quiver. So for weapon, the namesake of the build is Windripper, but the ironic thing is you don't actually need a Windripper to do this build well, really at all. All that Windripper really gives you is 15% increased item quantity, which we can get from other sources for way cheaper. So the bow is going to be one of the last items you pick up for this build initially, because all it does is really give you that increased item quantity. In terms of damage, it's kind of lacking in that department. All it really has going for it is a high critical strike chance and a high attacks per second kind of stat on it. In terms of the damage, it's a bit low, and we do actually have a better alternative here, which is going to juice up your damage a little bit more than a Windripper would, and that is Lionized Glare. So Lionized Glare is about an alchemy orb instead of 2 exalts for the Windripper. So ultimately you do want that Windripper to max out your magic find, but before then you can just use a Lionized Glare as a very budget option. You don't need the Windripper bow. This is going to do just fine until you can afford it. So one thing I really want to talk about quickly here with the Windripper bow is the whole reason we use it is because of that 15% increased item quantity of items dropped by slain enemies, which are frozen. And that's the really important part there, that they're frozen. So remember when we were talking about consistency and increased critical strikes and the diamond flask, the reason we're running all those things is so that we freeze enemies so that when we kill them, they count as slain frozen enemies, so we can get that increased item quantity. If we're not killing them when they're frozen, we're losing out on some magic find, and that's the whole point of this build, so we want to maximize that, and that's why increased critical strikes is my option for my 6th link. So that's kind of the reasoning behind it, and that's why we're using that bow, but Lionized Glare will get you by just fine until you can afford this bow. So next up we got our quiver. There are two options here. You can go for a shaped quiver with the +1 projectiles here, but that is going to require you to craft it yourself or buy one off another player. That's a bit too expensive. So I'm going to make another video showing you guys how to make that. So you can look for that coming up. If you're not subscribed, you can just subscribe to see when that comes out, and you'll be good to go. But for most other players who don't have a lot of exalts to throw around, just a rare quiver is going to do well for you. So what you want to look for in this quiver is a bit of life, maybe a little bit resist if you need it, some attack speed, which is very good, some critical strike multiplier, and maybe a bit of elemental damage with attacks. And that's basically all you need from your gear. Hopefully this has given you a pretty good rundown of what you're looking for. And as you can see, 5 link, probably not too expensive. Helmet, most expensive part of the build to begin with, probably a couple exalts at least. You can get a bow for an elk. Boots, probably around 15 to 20 chaos for a good roll. Gloves, 1 elk. Amulet, 5 to 10 chaos, depending on what kind of amulet you're looking for. If you get a shaped one, not too bad. Belt, probably around 1 or 2 chaos. If you go for the rare, though, it might be a little bit more expensive. Rings, Thief's Torment, 10 chaos. So you're really looking at a pretty big budget build here. Probably about 3, 4, maybe 5 exalt if you're really going for it. And the thing that makes it cost a little bit more is this jewel here. Lionized Fall is a jewel which is very good. And what it does is it allows you to skimp on your leech on the tree a little bit. So what the jewel does is it turns melee attacks modifiers into bow modifiers. So where you want to put this jewel specifically is exactly here. When you get this jewel, put it only in this position. And the reason you're doing that is because we have some claw nodes up here, which are going to give you some leech and some critical strike multiplier. And as you can see here, the radius has that in there, and that allows us to get our mana leech and life leech very, very efficiently on the tree and save a lot of skill points. So this is going to be an essential item for you to pick up, and it's basically on par with your 5-link Queen of the Forest. You want to pick up these 2 items before you even get started. So very, very important, even more so than the helmet enchant. So the other thing here we have is Dying Sun. So Dying Sun is a flask that drops off Shaper. It costs a lot of money. It's about 4 or 5 exalts. So basically what the build costs initially again. But what it does is it adds 2 projectiles to your attacks. So again, we understand Tornado Shot benefits a lot of having additional projectiles. So having a Dying Sun is going to increase your damage, clear speed, and overall feel of the build a lot. So that's why we're using that. Again, it costs a lot. Is it necessary? No. Is it nice? Hell yeah, it's nice. It feels really good. And it's going to be one of the items you want to pick up before your 6th link, so it's very, very powerful. The last thing I have here is Watcher's Eye. So you can pick up a Watcher's Eye. Watcher's Eye is a jewel that drops off Elder, yellow and higher, and the one you're looking for is while you're affected by Drace, you gain increased movement speed. So it goes up to 15%. Mine's a pretty bad roll, but basically it's just going to give you more movement speed, more clear speed, and so it'll allow you to get around a little bit faster. That's going to go for about an exalt on Peewee trade, so it's a little bit expensive, but it's another item you guys can pick up. So that's going to be the gear. I'm going to talk about which pieces you want to get in which order at the end of the video. So let's get into stats you want to grab real quick. So for offense, what you're looking for is flat lightning and cold damage to make up for the low damage on Windripper, and then increase elemental damage and elemental damage with attacks, which is basically the same thing, increase elemental damage. You can find that on the tree in a few places, so you've got some down here on the tree and then some up here, which is really good. And then finally, you want a bit of critical strike multiplier. We're a critical strike based build, so it's going to really juice you up a lot. For defense, just the standard life and resist will get you by just fine, and you'll do really well from that. For speed, we want to do attack speed and movement speed. That's how we're going to be able to increase our clear speed. We want movement speed to get around the map faster, and then we want attack speed so that we shorten the time in between us attacking and moving again by a significant amount. So that's how we're going to scale our character. And there's a few map mods I want to cover here as well. So the ones in red here are danger, danger, danger zone. So when you alch your maps and you see these mods on there, you want to scour it or chaos it and then re-alch the map to get rid of these mods because you don't want to be running them. So Elemental Reflect and Physical Reflect will basically kill you as soon as you hit any monsters in the map. If you're a bit of a professional player and you know what you're doing, you can work around Physical Reflect. But for the average player, reroll both these basically immediately. No Leech is going to make it so we can't sustain our character, so we need to reroll that. And Temporal Chains is going to make you attack and move very slow, which makes it so that playing the maps is very uncomfortable and not good. The ones in yellow here are kind of up to you. You guys have to try it out a little bit yourself, see how they feel. If they feel really bad to you, maybe add it to the list of ones you want to reroll. If they feel okay, you can run with them anyway. There's one here I want to talk about though, 90% for monsters to avoid ailments. Basically, monsters have a 90% chance not to be frozen. So remember, on our Windripper bow, we need to freeze and shatter enemies to basically get that magic find. So when we're looking at this mod, we're basically losing 90% of our, 15% of our magic find when we roll this mod. So basically, I always re-roll this to get maximum amount of magic find from my maps. I have a bit of information about team comp down here. That's not going to be too important for a lot of you guys. If you play in teams, you'll know what this is anyway, so you guys can check that out. So that's basically going to sum up the spreadsheet. A lot of information there, but let's get straight into the skill tree. So we've got the skill tree here. You can find this in the description after the video, as well as the spreadsheet, and you guys can kind of check that out. So initially, I want to cover just basically the two different options you have here. You can go max clear speed, or you can go defensive for high tier red maps. So what I've got set up here is movement speed right now for low tier maps, and what you want to be looking for to pick up movement speed is the nodes over here, and over here. All of these give you a ton of movement speed, as you can see. And these are going to really make you move a lot faster in maps. So if you don't really care too much about lower maps though, and you're doing high tier red maps, you really want to be picking up a lot more defense. So you want to drop these nodes on this tree and go for some more life, which you'll find up here and down here. So that's going to make you have a lot more life and be a lot more tanky, so you can survive some of the auto attacks and kind of abilities in high tier maps, which is going to be really good for you. But I like the movement speed build a lot more. I like to clear fast. I don't really care about doing bosses too much in high tier maps. I have a separate character for that, so I like to go movement speed on my Windripper build. So when you're leveling up, there's a certain path you want to follow, and the one that I followed was getting the most damage I possibly could early on. So when I'm leveling up, I went down around here, I grabbed some cold damage over here, I went down around here, I grabbed elemental damage over here when leveling up, and then I went up around here. I ignored the crit for the time being. I came left, down, and grabbed some more elemental damage. I went up around here, went through the life, grabbed all the critical strike and attack speed and stuff from Shadow, and then I backtracked a little bit, grabbed the crit over here and the crit over here. So that's going to give you a ton of damage, which will allow you to have smooth gameplay throughout the leveling process. And then obviously you can fill out your life as you see fit in the later levels. And that's kind of what I did for leveling, and it's going to do really well for you. Again, just to reiterate, the Lionized Full Jewel needs to go over here, and you're going to get some juicy leech nodes and critical strike multiplier nodes from that. So that's going to be really important. Another thing to really note about my tree is that because I'm using so many uniques in game, like Headhunter and stuff like that, I needed to pick up resistance nodes on the tree, which you can see over here. If you're running more rares than me, like a rare belt or something like that, you can actually afford to drop some of these resistance nodes if you'd like. So you can drop these and maybe go for a little bit more damage. You get some attack speed over here, or maybe even more life. You can go back around there. There's some life over here, and you can basically pick up whatever you'd like. So there's a lot of flexibility in Windripper. You can go more movement speed, more life, more resists if you have a lot of bad unique items, and you can kind of build your own character how you see fit. Again, if you want more information about that, you can check out my first video, and you'll be okay with that. The other thing about Windripper is it requires a lot of intelligence off the tree because we're playing a ranger and we don't get much of intelligence from the kind of character itself. Having said that, though, if you pick up a shaped amulet with intelligence on it, you can actually probably afford to drop this intelligence node a lot of the time and pick up another piece of kind of stuff on the tree. Maybe you want to grab some defensive in acrobatics, but I have to grab this because I have a biscodes on right now instead of a shaped amulet. So that's kind of going to be the skill tree in general. Remember those stats we were picking up, just look for those on the skill tree, so life and all that kind of stuff. Again, path of building link in the description, so you guys are going to be able to copy this pretty easily. I want to talk about the ascendancy really quickly. So for the Deadeye, the first ascendancy point you want to pick up is Gathering Winds. So Gathering Winds is a really insane node. Basically, it's going to give you a buff called Tailwind, which effectively is going to increase your movement speed, attack speed, and cast speed by a factor of 20%. So if I have 400% increased movement speed, or let's just do something easier, 200% increased movement speed, I'm going to go to 240. If I have 200% increased attack speed, I'll go to 240. So it's a very good node, and it's going to give you a lot of movement speed and attack speed, and it's the first thing you want to pick up when you're playing a Deadeye. Next up, you want to go for Fast and Deadly. So Fast and Deadly is going to halve the cooldown of your Blink Arrow, which is your main mobility spell, which is a really nice bonus. In addition to that, the main thing we're going for here is the accuracy rating is doubled. So when you look at my accuracy rating over here, we're going to bring that up over here, Tornado Shot. I got 93% with the node. Without it, I have 88%. So as you can see here, it gives me a lot of damage from picking up this node because of the accuracy I get from it. It basically is going to increase the consistency of your build, the smoothness, and overall play of the build. So that's why I go for that. Really nice for the attack speed and projectile damage as well, but in general, I mainly take it for blink arrow and the accuracy rating. Next up, you want fast shot. It's what we talked about in the beginning. It's going to give you damage the further you are away from the target, which is basically just going to juice up your damage even more. And lastly, we grab endless munitions as our last ascendancy point. So it's going to give you another projectile, which we know is very good for tornado shot. So that's the Ascendancy in a nutshell. That is Deadeye. Deadeye is the best option for this build, and bow builds in general. If you're playing a clear speed bow build, I would always recommend going Deadeye over the other options. So very, very good, and it's going to be very effective for you guys. So lastly, I wanted to talk about the Pantheon because I know a lot of you guys are going to ask. Pantheon is not too important in Path of Exile. It's not a very impactful feature, but for your major god, you want to go for Brian King to reduce stuns on you. For your minor, if you have poison immunity, go with Soul of Shikari. If you don't, probably look at Soul of Tukahama or Soul of Yugal if you're running physical reflect maps. That's going to be the Pantheon, nice and quick. And now I really want to quickly go over how you're going to progress with your gear. So with your gear, the first thing you want to pick up is your 5-link Queen of the Forest, which is going to be an essential part of your build. It's very, very important. And when you're picking that up, you also want to pick up the Lionized Fall Jewel for Leech, so you can get those juicy nodes we talked about on the tree earlier. So these two items are the first things you want, and they're going to be very essential for you. Next up, you're going to get a few cheap items. You're going to pick up either a rare or shaped amulet for a few chaos. You're going to pick up your Seedemia's Touch for about an alchemy orb, well-rolled gold worms for a few chaos, and you're also going to pick up a rare quiver for not too much. In addition to that, you'll also pick up either rare rings if you're a little less confident, or a Thief's Torment for around 10 chaos. And that's going to be a really good kind of base for your character. In addition to those things, you'll also pick up either a Bisco's Leash, rare belt, or a Darkness Enthroned, whichever one you like. I recommend Bisco's Leash, it's a lot of fun. So all those things are going to be very cheap indeed, and it's going to get you started. For your weapon of choice, you're going to pick Lionized Glare over Windripper to begin with, and that's basically going to fill out all of your slots but the helmet slot, which you're going to be looking for to basically choose on. It's based on your price range, basically. That's a lot of basicallys. So you want to choose based on your price range. If you don't have a lot of money, go with the rare. If you have a bit more, Sarcongers, more Light Poacher, and finally, if you have a ton, Devoter's Devotion. Basically. So that's going to be that. After you've got those things, then you can start looking at a few other more expensive items. So I would probably recommend upgrading your helmet until you can get to Devotos. That's going to be the biggest upgrade for you, other than the next things we're going to talk about. So after this, you probably want to pick up the Windripper bow. Windripper is going to give you more quantity, and after that, you're basically going to be at max quantity, which is going to give you the most magic find that you can get. After the Windripper bow, though, again, if you haven't upgraded your helmet to the highest one yet, I would probably look at doing that. And then after that, you can look at getting a Dying Sun, which is about 5 exalts. So that's definitely not cheap, but it's going to increase the consistency and single target a lot. Very, very good. After that, you want to probably look at upgrading your quiver to a shaped quiver, which is going to give you 1 more projectile. This is probably going to cost around 2 exalted orbs, but it's definitely worth it, and it's going to be very good for you. After that, you're going to grab a 6-link body armor, and then after that is when you're going to look at grabbing some Venter's Gamble Magic Find Rings. And then finally, after all this, grab a Watcher's Eye and follow it up with a Headhunter if you can afford it. Other than that, though, that's basically going to be the progression you want. Hopefully you guys have learned something in this video. Hopefully it's not too long for you guys, and I'll teach you guys how to make that quiver in the coming video, but that's going to be the guide. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it, and hopefully this is on YouTube because it's been such a frustrating time getting this up. See you guys in the next one. Cheers for watching as always. See you.